Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about the traits of a covert narcissist, how to recognize. So, the covert narcissists are a little bit different than the overt narcissists in that they present, actually, they're a lot different in that they present a mask to the world that is different than their true self. Overts are pretty just in your face, they're easier to spot. Coverts typically have that mask of goodness, or sometimes it's particular goodness, a mask of perfection, and possibly like a higher level of integrity than other people. That's sort of how they come across, as like the nicest guy or like the nicest woman. And some examples of like, covert narcissists are sort of like the Catholic priest. Not that all Catholic priests are this way, but that are, so kind and benevolent and altruistic, and then they're secretly pedophiles. Or cult. Been a lot of cult leaders that were covert narcissists. Well, so what are some of the traits? One is you'll see that they typically do not have a strong sense of self, like a knowing of who they are, like a feeling of like they're like this authentic person, and like who they are. They don't have a strong sense of self. There's usually with coverts there's really it's silent rage. You don't Sometimes you don't ever see it come out. I mean, or rarely, but it's like simmering under the surface. Lying. They lie compulsively and really well. So a lot of people in relationships with these people, they could be in a long-term relationship. Like I was in a relationship for a long time, and I thought my partner had a really high level of integrity and like was not a liar. In fact, it was sort of shocking to me during the discard phase to find out what an amazingly crafty liar he was. It kind of blew my mind. But that's really common when you're dealing with a covert narcissist. They're amazingly good liars. There's an underlying sort of constant criticism, and it's a lot of times, or at least in my case, it was almost like not nonverbal. It was like implied. Like I always felt like there's nothing I could do that was right. I mean, in the love bombing phase, nothing I did was wrong. But then later, I just couldn't. There was just nothing you do is right. There could be a lot of, so for sure, projection. They project their insecurities and their issues onto you. So a lot of times, whatever they sort of accuse you of, you just in your head just know that that's what their stuff is. And a lot of times it really isn't your stuff at all. But if you're sort of empathetic, or if you're a codependent, you tend to think everything's your fault. So it's really easy for you to sort of accept that. But a lot of times when they're accusing you of something, or implying that something is your fault, really, a lot of times it's probably them projecting their own stuff onto you. And they tend to be jealous, and but the jealousy could be in the form of like, it's not necessarily like sexual jealousy. At least in my case, it didn't appear that he was jealous of other men. It was more that he was jealous of my accomplishments. So it's more almost like envy. Like the healthier you get, because in the context of my relationship, I got healthier and healthier as I stayed sober longer. I did a lot of work in recovery. I did a lot of healing work. I did therapy and EMDR and somatic body work, and I just really started to heal myself. The parts of me that were insecure and didn't love myself, I started to heal them. And the better I got, the more, I think, envious and jealous he got. The more my relationships outside of him with women that were appropriate became much more close and connected and honest and intimate. And I had real friends, not sort of my barstool friends from the old days. Not that all my old friends were not real friends. I had great friends, but in the end of my addiction, my friends became, they were unhealthy people like me. So the longer I stayed sober and got better, I was, improving, and that was not acceptable in the relationship. So they project their own issues onto you. This is a big one. Their words do not match their actions. So be really mindful when you're in a relationship if someone's words do not match their actions. Mine would say, that he, well, this is sort of personal, but mine would say that he wanted intimacy 3 or 4 times a week, but his actions never matched that. So there's things like that. Or he'd say he wanted, to complete projects around the house, and he just wouldn't complete them. So there's many other examples of that, but they tend to be emotionally disconnected. They're detached, they're emotionally disconnected. There's not the closeness, that intimacy that you sort of are desiring in a relationship. They're famous for withholding. They withhold praise, they withhold recognition, they withhold compliments, they withhold affection, they can tend to withhold physical intimacy. They're miserly with their affection. And often they often work a lot in intermittent reinforcement. So they could be feeding you a little morsel of affection or intimacy here and there, and then starve you out. So they're like masters at withholding. Let's see, what are some of the other characteristics? So they tend to operate in really passive aggressive ways. They may belittle you or teach you lessons later. They might tend to agree to your face on something, and then later on they just don't do it. Or that happens so many times when I think back on it. But there's a lot of that sort of passive aggressiveness. They could be like, yeah, I'll do that, and then later on they just won't do it. So, and you start getting this feeling that this person just doesn't really care about what your needs are. And in fact, that's probably true. I remember being very specific and trying to be very specific and loving when I was addressing some of the lack of physical and emotional intimacy in my relationship, and sort of being very vulnerable and saying, these are my needs, can you meet them? And he would say, yes, I can, or I'll try, and then he just wouldn't. Or he'd try for a day and then he wouldn't. So it's really a weird dynamic. They're very self-focused, and they tend to be very emotionally immature. These are people that have a low level of emotional intelligence. If you think of it like you're almost dealing with the emotional intelligence of a toddler. I found myself in the context of my relationship having, needing to explain things to him in terms of emotions that as you would to a child, where I where a grown man, I wouldn't have to explain that like he was a little kid or a little toddler. And they were very basic concepts that of sort of morality and decency that or someone's emotional state that he should have picked up on. I remember when we were in a natural disaster, and people were just screaming and wailing around us, and I had to tell him to hug. I was hug that lady, and I sort of chalked it up to, well, shock. Shock makes people weird. But when I look back, he was really, he was physically there for difficult times, but he was not emotionally there. He was not really able to offer comfort, like a sort of a normal person would do. And then you'll get this feeling that there are there's strings attached to them. Anything that they do for you, it's there's a somehow you owe them. There's always there's a string attached to anything that they do. They definitely use people. They use people. People to them are sort of like appliances. They're interchangeable, and they use them. They can use them for validation, approval, money, status, sex, all sorts of things. But basically, to them, it seems like people are sort of like objects. In terms of conversations, trying to have a conversation with a covert narcissist is, it's been referred to in the literature as it's word salad, or, the conversations are dizzying. You walk away and you're what just happened there? And you're trying to have a normal interaction. And I experienced this throughout the whole relationship, and then the therapist really pointed it out also in our couples therapy. He did go to couples therapy for 14 sessions prior to me finding out about the long-term affair he had been having with a married colleague at work. And our therapist pointed out that there was this there was just issues with communicating with him. Like he could not seem to communicate like a grown person. And the conversations were, they're very manipulative. So they call it word salad in the literature, and they're manipulators. So you can ask a direct question and you get either silent treatment or stonewalling. Well, or mine would just look at me and blink when I asked a direct, sincere, normal question, like couldn't answer it. Or wouldn't answer it. So the conversations with them are highly manipulative, and you walk away with your head spinning. And I found myself realizing that those were not the kind of conversations I had with anyone else in my life. So yeah, you don't feel protected by them. You feel like they would throw you under the bus. It's like this feeling you get that, like, behind your back, like they don't have your back. I always sort of felt like that. Like, I just didn't feel like he had my back. And it turns out he definitely did not have my back. They create a lot of stories in their head, and they're sort of, which we all do this, we're all guilty of this, but the stories in their head probably have no basis in reality. They're distorted. They're just distorted cognitions. You get the feeling that they have actually no desire to actually get to know you as a person. They're not curious. In the love bombing stages, this can be, they can act like they do care to get to know you, and they can ask questions and be the most attentive listeners because they are listening to sort of get information on you so that they can use it later to manipulate you. But after that, they're just not freaking curious about what is going on with you. It's almost like they just don't care. And they use a lot of control and manipulation. They're never direct in there. They never can come to you. Like my ex would never come to me and say, this is my need, can you meet it? And I'm a pretty direct, straightforward person, so that would have worked really well with me. If somebody that I cared about asked that, I would have been like, of course, I'll do anything I can to meet your need. But I felt like I had to be a mind reader in this relationship, and I'm not a mind reader, so it was very challenging. So, they use, they're passive aggressive, silent treatment is their weapon of choice. You'll have a lot of stonewalling where you can ask direct questions and they literally just don't answer you. Of course, gaslighting is huge. They operate in gaslighting, which is, subterfuge. They often have these covert narcissists. They always have a double life. The double life can be secret affairs, porn addiction, you name it, secret online, affairs with people. This is just how they operate. They have double lives. These are the people with double lives. So let's see, passive aggressive, stonewalling, gaslighting. I can't really think of any others right now. I'm sure there's a lot more, but these are some of the basics that just sort of help you understand if you are in fact dealing with a covert narcissist. Have a good day. Bye.